There's some out of town stupid thinking that the 2024 White Sox might not be so bad had they not played in the AL Central. Let's discuss why that's false thinking next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network. Also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And also follow or subscribe to this show at wherever you get your podcasts. Well, suddenly those who probably didn't watch all or at least the bulk of this year's 162 White Sox games this season, they think the 121 losses might not have happened had the Sox not been in the AL Central. Let's discuss how that is pretty much false. Then the Cincinnati Reds are hiring Terry Francona to take over as manager. Let's discuss how that impacts the White Sox manager search. And finally, the division series matchups all set, let's see if there are some bargain free agents on the four teams eliminated in the wild card round the Sox could pursue. And this episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. The right state can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. All right, don't let the out-of-town stupid fool you. The White Sox would have been historically awful, even if they were not in the AL Central. And that's the narrative a couple of media folks outside of Chicago tweeted out. And I'm not here to throw around that, hey, I watch more Sox games than you. And I'm sure that, you probably wouldn't be like, hey, I watched a lot more Sox games than you, and I know the White Sox around. I don't want to totally throw that around. But these takes that, well, the Sox lost 121 games because they played in a division with three playoff teams and another that came close is just off. It's false. And remember, context matters. And sometimes taking a narrow view leads to deceiving views. And the reason why I'm leading with this instead of, say, Terry Francona going to the Reds is because never underestimate the White Sox ability to rationalize things away. Think about it. Jerry Reinsdorf, the report in The Athletic that he still thinks hiring Tony La Russa was a good idea because they still won the 2021 division and the team has been historically awful since he was no longer the manager. Think about it. They can make the mental gymnastics work. The White Sox also, I think it was Michael Reinsdorf that said, Jerry Reinsdorf's son and the president of the Bulls said that, well, they at least didn't set the worst losing percentage record of all time. So the Sox have this great capacity for mental gymnastics to look and be like, you know what? 120 losses might not have been so bad. We played just in a very tough division. Now, the only silver lining is Jerry Reinsdorf, remember last year in 2023, said, well, things could turn around really quick because the Sox played in such a weak division. Maybe, again, these 121 losses and seeing that the division has completely lapped them, and in the case of the Guardians, double lapped them, that, got him to convince that, what, things can't be turned around quickly. That's about the only thing. But there's a lot of context being missed with these couple of takes. Baseball author and writer for thescore.com, Travis Sawchik, he tweeted this at Travis_Sawchik. Were the White Sox that bad, or did they just play in the best division of all time? Okay, podcaster and formerly of The Athletic and ESPN Cleveland's TJ Zuppe at TJ Zuppe. Maybe the White Sox weren't so bad. They were just locked in the big bad AL Central. Mick Shafter, sports director of Kansas City's NBC affiliate, KSHB, Channel 41. He tweeted this at Mick Schaefer. Hot take. The White Sox were actually decent, just had to play 52 games against the rest of this dynamic division. And Athletic senior writer Andy McAuliffe tweeted this at by McAuliffe. The dominance of these AL Central teams leads me to believe the White Sox may have gotten a raw deal. Okay. McAuliffe actually contributed to a piece in The Athletic recently that ranked the White Sox as the second worst pro team in all of sports. They actually went even to European soccer teams and compared it, and they put the White Sox number 2. And yet suddenly he's like, well, they got a raw deal. No, they didn't get a raw deal. They were bad. Okay? They didn't play defense. They didn't play good offense. They couldn't score runs. The only thing that they had was starting pitching. The bullpen was just atrocious. It was a bad team. It was a dysfunctional franchise. And the other thing is, I do think the Cleveland Guardians and the Kansas City Royals are very good teams, and the Detroit Tigers are on an epic heater. But just because the Royals and the Tigers won a playoff series should not take away that these teams should actually be thinking thanking their lucky stars that they got to play the White Sox, especially the Royals and the Tigers. As everydayers heard on Tuesday's show, the Guardians would be 84-63 if they hadn't played the White Sox. And remember, the Sox actually beat the Guardians 5 times. They were 5-8. Up until the last series, there was a possibility that the Sox could have won the season series against the Guardians. So I'm taking that out. Don't say that, oh, they had to play the Guardians more than any other, a couple more times. Didn't matter. The Tigers would be 76-73. The Royals would be 73-74. And the Twins, 70-77. That was their record. Those were those three teams' records against every other baseball team. Okay? So don't act like, oh, the Sox were in this juggernaut division. The division ate up on the White Sox in context. And again, I think the Royals are a very good team. Bobby Witt Jr. is in my top 5 of favorite players outside of the White Sox. So don't get on, and Tariq Skubal, I love how he pitches for the Tigers, and I would love AJ Hinch to be the manager of the White Sox. But again, context matters. So when you take these hot takes, it's not a hot take. It's completely false. And again, why am I talking about this? We can never forget this season. Okay? And again, the Sox have an incredible ability to rationalize things away. And again, this team blew 56 leads with a huge majority coming from the bullpen. And some of those blown leads came against the Twins. But for the most part, the blown leads late were against pretty much every other team. Sox were shut out 19 times. Only 6 of them came from the AL Central. The White Sox scored 507 runs this season, okay? Other historically awful teams, the 03 Tigers, who almost broke the 62 Mets record, they scored 591 runs that year. The 62 Mets, they scored 617 runs. The context is, if you score that few of runs, you're going to probably set a losing record. And in the Sox case, they scored 110 runs less than the 62 Mets. No wonder why they ended up with one extra loss. 3 double-digit losing streaks the White Sox had. 3. The first one was 14 games. None of that happened against the AL Central. And I believe they also lost that streak. If I remember looking back, they only won 1 game in their out of 20 games in that stretch too, before beating Boston. 1. And again, none of it was against the AL Central. The 21 game losing streak of awfulness, 10 of those defeats came from the AL Central, and it was to the Royals and the Twins. So how does that explain the other 11 losses? Oh, because other teams were just better than the White Sox. The 12-game losing streak later in the season, just 4 came against the Tigers. The Sox were 10-22 against the AL East, and 4 of them came against Tampa. 10-22 against the AL West, 11-35 in the AL Central. So yes, while you had to play a couple more extra games, because you only play 44 against the rest of the American League. If my math is correct, you play 46 against the National League. And again, this isn't when you used to play 72 games against your division. You played 52, okay? And they were 10-42 against the AL Central. So yes, those extra games against the AL Central was on the biblically sized list of reasons the Sox had a record-setting season for defeats. But it likely would have happened had the Sox been in any other division. NL Central, they got swept by the Pirates, and they were outscored 24-7. The Reds crushed them in a 3-game set, outscoring them 27-5. The Cubs and Brewers, Sox blew leads against them. The Cardinals were the only team that the Sox beat in that division in terms of a series, 2-1, but they also needed a massive rain delay and bad umpiring to win that road series. Imagine playing that division a couple of more times. The NL West, yeah, maybe there's some hope as the Sox took 2 of 3 from the Rockies, and they looked way better than the Rockies. That's when the Sox still had Eric Fetty and Michael Kopech. But imagine having to play the Dodgers as much as playing the Twins, because the Dodgers just took them to school. Made the Sox look like a double-A team. NL East, okay, the Sox did well against Atlanta, but the Sox needed a makeup game to take 2 of 3, and they needed Garrett Crochet to be pitching like an ace. Otherwise, Michael Kopech gave up 2 leads to the Marlins. I know that. Sox beat the Nationals, obviously, but they got crushed by Philadelphia and the Mets. You can make the argument the Sox could have done better than the AL West, but you take out the Sox. First of all, you're not taking into account the Sox blew some leads to the Mariners and the Rangers. So you could say, well, hey, if they go the other way, the Sox obviously have a better record. But what is there to say that the Angels and the A's get some wins against the Sox had they played each other earlier in the season? Because when the Sox played the Angels in September, the last week of the season, the Angels were just not interested in being there. So let's remember, too, the Sox had terrible luck this season. A lot of those blown leads, too, were just – I remember the Sox lost a game on a broken bat single. At least gave up a lead on that. The ball just finding that one spot. The most heartbreaking loss this season was when the Sox nearly had a walk-off home run. Absolutely got robbed by – it was against the Rangers. Absolutely got robbed by one of the best home run robbing catches you would ever see in your life. So that's the thing that, take that all into account. Well, the dream of Terry Francona managing the White Sox ended overnight when the Reds are expected to name him as their next manager. But let's discuss how that could make it easier for the Sox to hire their reported top target, former Marlins manager Skip Schumaker. Let's discuss that next on Locked On White Sox. For those of us who thrive on getting stuff done, including workouts, every minute counts. That's why you need Tonal, the smart strength training system that takes the guesswork out of working out so you can make sure you're making the most of every rep. Tonal is the world's smartest and most effective strength training system that helps you get stronger. Powered by AI, Tonal learns with every rep so it can deliver workouts personalized just for you. And Tonal learns from your movement and provides suggested weight recommendations for every move with detailed progress reports. They even create a personalized program and workout suggestions or recommendations based on your individual goals. It's like having a personal trainer at home with you, as Tonal will optimize every workout just for you. Unlike traditional gym equipment, Tonal uses adaptive digital weight to advance your training techniques. From professional athletes to the mom of 3, Tonal is trusted by thousands who have become their strongest. Right now, Tonal is offering our listeners $200 off your Tonal purchase with promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Tonal.com and use promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $200 off your purchase. Again, that's TONAL.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $200 off. And welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you're not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, as Locked On White Sox is available at places such as Apple and Spotify. And again, this weekend, if you got to rake some leaves, if the leaves are starting to fall early for you, pop me in. We can talk, you can hear me talk about, again, context mattering for the White Sox. You can go back to previous episodes too. Like I said, if you're stuck in traffic, sitting on the Kennedy, let me at least help you vent, when it comes to, because it seems like, you might be thinking, man, Todd, you're just so negative. This season has just made me so negative. So if you want to be like, gah, in traffic, let me be the gah for you. You can be like, okay, it's not so bad. I'll eventually get to where I want to be. And trust me, I'm not a guy who likes to sit in traffic either. All right, so Terry Francona, managing the White Sox was always going to be a dream. It was always going to be a fantasy. If he was going to come out of retirement and with his credentials, he was going to want to go to a team that was already contending or just on the cusp. So it makes sense for him to go to the Reds because the Reds are just on the cusp. They just got to make a few moves and they could be right at the top of the NL Central. Although it would have been nice for the Sox to go big, swoop in with a massive contract, give Tito a huge amount of influence and power within the organization. But instead, you and I have to settle for Tony La Russa still being around as a consultant, as that's the closest the Sox are going to have to a Hall of Fame manager being associated with this franchise. Although this could have a huge impact on the Sox manager search, and actually having Tony around might not be so bad if the Sox reported top target is still Skip Schumaker. I know 670 The Score's Bruce Levine reported that the Sox are targeting Dodgers first base coach Clayton McCullough, but Bob Nightingale, the last time he reported on the Sox manager search, it was the top target being Skip Schumaker. And since Bob Nightingale is pretty much the unofficial spokesperson for the Sox front office, I'm going to take his word over a weighted word. And again, Did Bruce Levine get this from somebody in Clayton McCullough's camp that's trying to hype him up? I'm not suggesting that. I've met Bruce before. I actually do, I don't like how everything is so, he paints everything so rosy and he defends Tony La Russa to the death. I'm not a huge fan of that, but he does do his work and he does do his due diligence. He's a very good reporter. He's obviously a great veteran reporter. He could probably take me to school on that, but it's just when you get all this information, you got to look at it where, why is it being used? Why is Bruce being used to throw this out into the ether? Is it a trial balloon? That could be it too. Maybe Clayton McCullough is the guy. So let's see. But if Skip Schumaker is still the Sox top target, this looks very good because the Cincinnati Reds were reported by Bob Nightingale to be targeting Skip Schumaker. But obviously, if you got Skip Schumaker, Terry Francona is above. I mean, Terry Francona is a Hall of Fame manager. Won a World Series, won 2 World Series with the Boston Red Sox. Nearly won another one with the Cleveland Guardians. Had there not been a rain delay in Jason Hayward's emotional, rain delay speech. He could have snapped 2 major World Series droughts. So I get why the Reds are going with Terry Francona over Skip Schumaker. And you can have your concerns about Skip. The Marlins did have a 100-loss season this year. And despite racking up a ton of injuries, he wasn't able to be a plus manager enough to rally the Marlins to still win, to avoid that 100 losses. I mean, the Marlins were decimated by injuries. But Skip Schumaker's boss also gutted the team, and he gutted it early in the season when he traded Luis Arraez to the Padres so early. I mean, they threw the white flag up very, very quickly. So it's very hard to be like, hey, let's go out and win, guys, when everybody in the clubhouse could be like, well, your boss just basically said we shouldn't even be trying. And again, here's what I like about Skip. Credentials, okay? Has that NL Manager of the Year award and postseason experience. And before you say, well, the Marlins got lucky in 2003. Well, yeah, you do need a little bit of luck on your hand. You do need to be able to win close games. You do need to get some bounces going your way. Because when it completely goes the opposite, we just survived it, folks. 121 losses. And he has experience navigating a dysfunctional franchise. And he did find a way to win in that environment in 2023. And you don't think the Marlins aren't dysfunctional? They allowed Kim Ng to walk away, a very qualified executive who built that 2023 Marlins team. They let her walk away because they wanted to give her a boss. They still didn't think she was doing a good enough job. That franchise has always been dysfunctional. Forever. They've just found a way every now and again to spend some money. I like that Skip is a former big league player. I am also big on that after that Grifol disaster. One of the things that I think Grifol lost in communication was he just had never played in the big leagues. It's very hard to communicate to struggling players from a position when you haven't been there, and Skip has. And the Sox are going to have struggling players, partly because of the talent issues, but partly because this team is signaling going young, and there are going to be natural growing pains there. So it makes more sense to have a guy that says, you know what, I was there. I know what it's like to go through, a 2 for 25 slump. Here's what I did. We're going to get through it. We're going to work together. That's huge. Now, the defensive issues, because the Marlins were one of the worst they were the worst defensive team in Major League Baseball. So that can also be a reason why you might want to be like, you know what, I'm not a fan of Skip. But defensive issues can also be one part players' weaknesses and strengths, and 2 parts not having the correct information to position your players. And we know the White Sox are weak in that area, in both areas, actually. And if you're going to go with a developmental approach, it can never hurt to have someone with ties to the St. Louis Cardinals in terms of, remember, that franchise was outstanding at teaching the game to be played correctly with detail. That was a really good franchise at developing talent until recently. And obviously that reputation has worn off. And also Tony La Russa showed that if you play the 2011 Cardinal style of play, it doesn't really work in the 2020s. But Skip has shown he can evolve he can evolve beyond that. He's kind of, shown that, hey, he's been recently in the game, where Tony La Russa was not recently in the game. That's one of the reasons why it completely passed him by. But the Reds being off the list clears a path for the Sox to hire Schumaker, because as of now, the Marlins are the only one that are opening. That's it. And again, I say as of now is because Bud Black's status with the Rockies is still up in the air from what I keep reading and seeing. People could say, well, the Mariners' job is open. Actually, little detail, little nugget in MLB.com's Daniel Kramer's report a month ago. Dan Wilson was actually hired to be the manager full time. He was not given the interim tag. He was hired to be the skipper going forward. The Cardinals are planning on bringing Oli Marmol back, so cross off a reunion there. Sounds like the Jays are not going to fire their manager and instead go with just a coaching staff shakeup. The Yankees and Dodgers obviously could fire their leaders if there's an early playoff exit, so you still have to keep your eye out there. There was talk of Brian Snitker would step down in Atlanta, but he's reportedly pledged to come back next season. So if the Dodgers, Yankees, and Rockies do not make a move, then that basically leaves the Sox as the only landing spot for Schumaker. And the Rockies are the only team that could technically still swoop in, as Bud Black is technically out of contract years. But reports I've read, again, is Denver indicate, out of Denver is he could return. The owner does like Bud Black. He's given him so much time. Now, there is speculation that Marmol is only safe for this season or for 2025 as the Cardinals announces a succession plan in the front office, and a new head will take over after the 2025 season ends. So Schumaker could choose to pass on the Sox job, sit out the season, or say bench coach or take a television job someplace, and then see what is on the market in 2026 and see if the Cardinals job is available, since that's where he played, his entire career at. And also, don't forget, a team could pull a Chicago Cubs, fire their current manager if they believe Schumaker could have that Joe Madden or Craig Counsell effect. But the only difference is Madden and Counsell had a lot more skins on the wall than Schumaker. Schumaker just has 2 seasons. Joe Madden and Craig Counsell were established plus managers for years. And I can't believe I'm going to say this, but this is the one time, if the Sox are going to hire Schumaker, and especially if you're in that camp of let's hire Skip Schumaker, or you at least want to see the Sox make a splash hire, this is the one time you want Tony La Russa in the room. This is actually the one time you probably want Tony making the decision, because La Russa was Skip's manager during the early portion of Schumaker's playing career. Now, I don't know what the relationship was like, and I did cover the Cardinals clubhouse a few times when I was covering baseball, and especially when Tony was in charge, and I always explained it like this. It had no joy. You walked in, and you felt like you were walking into hell. I'm sorry, abandon all joy. Now part of it was the players were just very professional, very businesslike, but you just walked in and there was where is the love of baseball here? I mean, he was definitely the fun police. So, but I do know from my time briefly covering the Cardinals, players did respect Tony. They did. They had a lot of respect for him. They definitely reflected that this is business. We're here to win. So, maybe he convinces Skip to take the job and also convinces Jerry Reinsdorf it is worth paying him, because I don't think, I think you're escaping Miami to get out of that dysfunctional mess, but you're also not leaving Miami without wanting a bump in pay. Well, the Brewers, Braves, Orioles, and Astros have been eliminated from the playoffs. Might they have some bargain pending free agents the White Sox could try to sign? Let's discuss next on Locked On White Sox. This episode of Locked On White Sox is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, booking.yeah. With hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation resort rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rivals' city during the postseason. The Guardians and the Tigers are facing each other in the ALDS, and if you want to root against both teams and maybe take in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or tour Motown, use Booking.com to book your next stay. Booking.com can help you book a stay that's close to your home teams or rivals' stadium. No matter what team you are rooting for this postseason, Booking.com can make you a fan of any U.S. city. From hotels that look over stadiums to family-friendly resorts to cute bed and breakfast stays, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Booking.com, booking.yeah. And welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter. Shout out to all my everydayers. I believe I do have a very loyal listener group in terms of that. And let's get it growing. Let's grow this community. Again, I want to be the safe place. I want to be the entertaining place. I want to be the place that challenges you, informs you. And especially if you've checked out on the White Sox and you just want to check in every now and again, Subscribe to the show, whether it's on YouTube at Locked On Sox or wherever you get your podcasts, Apple and Spotify. Also, hope you everydayers have a great weekend. Got a low-key weekend planned for me. Otherwise, again, hope it goes well. So, General Manager Chris Getz announced toward the end of the year that the Sox will not do heavy lifting in free agency to upgrade the roster. Not a shocker, considering ownership has never committed to heavy spending. And if you're going to embrace a rebuild, serve up youth. Now, that does not mean Getz should ignore going bargain shopping, at least. One, he should be trying to find his version of Brent Rooker. As I had Bez from ontapsports.net, ontapsportsnet.com, talked about on the show a couple of weeks ago. You want to be trying to find your Brent Rooker, a guy that teams have given up on that still could develop into a very good baseball player. Two, you want to see if you can have some veterans to flip at next year's deadline too, because right now the Sox only have one valuable player, and that is Garrett Crochet. And if he's traded in the offseason, well, you're not going to have much to move at next year's deadline to add some more potential pieces unless Luis Robert Jr. turned things around and maybe Andrew Benintendi's second half performance carries over into the next season. And even then, Sox are going to have to eat some money to move him. Three, you do want to bring in some guys that can show the younger, hopefully future stars such as Edgar Caro, Colson Montgomery, Brian Ramos, Jonathan Cannon, Drew Thorpe, Sean Burke. You kind of want to show them how a big leaguer should properly go about his business. So you do need some veteran leadership. And right now, that is a huge void that the Sox have. Now, the Orioles and Brewers have two pending big money free agents that would be perfect for the White Sox in terms of performance and leadership in Anthony Santander and Willy Adames. But again, that's a pipe dream since Getz has said he's not going to be spending that much. He's not going to be allowed to spend that much. And also, with people losing their minds over the new TV network, the Sox might not have enough cash on hand anyways. And that's one thing we have to take into account. I know Jerry's worth $2 billion, but probably most of his wealth is tied up in the actual value of the Bulls and the Sox, which again, sell the team, Jerry. So bargain shopping, they will go. So let's see if any eliminated teams have some players worth the Sox attention. Let's start with the Braves. The one target I would have is reliever AJ Minter. He's coming off hip surgery, though. So you don't exactly want to go down the path of letting big league players rehab on the big league roster, kind of like what the previous failed rebuild did. Joe Kelly was basically allowed to rehab for an entire season with the White Sox. You kind of don't want to do that. But at the same time, the context of the Sox being so bad now and how the bullpen trade market at last season at the 2024 deadline yielded some good deals, you could take a chance on them. However, the Sox better have a good defense behind him, as he had a 2.26 ERA, but his FIP was 4.45. So you got to get some defense behind him. Reliever Luke Jackson is another pitcher the Sox could gamble on. Had an ERA over 5 and a WHIP over 1.4, but he did pitch well for the Braves after coming over from the Giants in a trade. Had a 4.5 ERA and a 3.72 FIP with the Braves compared to a 4.51 FIP with the Giants. So you could see that, maybe the defense wasn't helping him in San Francisco. He was very good in 2021, injured in 2022, and good again in 2023. Hard to establish his true flip value as the Giants traded him to the Braves along with Jorge Soler, but the Giants did get the Braves number 17 prospect as part of that deal. Otherwise, not seeing much else there. Baltimore Orioles, not seeing a lot there either. Daniel Colombi could be, hopefully I pronounced that last name right, could be worth taking a flyer on, as the reliever did have a 2.12 ERA and a 0.67 WHIP. But he had to have elbow surgery to remove bone chips halfway through the season. He does have a club option for $4 million, but Spotrac projects his market as at $2 million. So maybe the Orioles decide, let's save a little bit of cash because this is still the cost-conscious Orioles. Otherwise, not seeing much there with Baltimore. Houston Astros, you got reliever Caleb Ferguson. He had a 4.64 ERA. Lefty reliever who struggled in New York and was traded at the deadline. Did post a 3.86 ERA with Houston. He's going to be 29 next season. Otherwise, you don't have much in the bargain bin for the Astros unless you really want Jason Hayward's leadership. Yeah. The Milwaukee Brewers, you got maybe Joe Ross to pursue, as he's a veteran starter / bullpen arm. Had his best career ERA with the Brewers with his best career ERA this season, 3.77, but he had a WHIP of 1.37, and did he maybe solve his struggling issues by being by getting into the Brewers pitching lab? Obviously the Brewers have a great pitching lab. They put guys in and they suddenly become really good pitchers. But if he starts to struggle again and he is away from that pitching lab, can he recover? Otherwise, there's not much on the bargain bin outside of maybe Gary Sanchez, but you're set at catcher and you kind of need that DH spot open too. So not seeing a ton of bargains there. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Hear about the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it covered every single day. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I will be back on Monday to discuss if you and I should be missing any of the former White Sox players still playing in the playoffs. Feel free to leave comments about today's topics. 1 second. Feel free to leave comments about today's topics, about the Sox still being historically awful, even if they played in another division, the path to hiring Skip Schumaker as manager becoming possibly easier with the Reds hiring Terry Francona, and the bargain free agents on the 4 teams that were just eliminated in the playoffs. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I'll see you Monday.